This conference will now be recorded.
I thought I'd call to order the Medical Marijuana Expert Review Committee. The first item of business would be to review the CTR physician annual report. CTR refers to the certificate to recommend medical marijuana. And as you know, annually, the physicians that prescribe marijuana have to submit a report to the medical board for review. And again, these reports can't contain any patient identifying the report goes also to the State of Ohio Board of Pharmacy. And what we're asking the committee to do is to review it and then, if appropriate, approve the publication of the report. Any comments or input?
It was very well done, Mark. I thought you did a nice job putting this together.
Yeah. We've been doing this for how many years now? Alexander, we've been submitting these reports for about 3 years now, I think.
Not quite 3, I don't think.
Okay.
Because this is just our second petition period.
So I guess
this is just our first report.
Is a motion from the committee to move forward with publication of the report. Michael, Dr. Shen, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. I thought we would go next to reviewing the expert.
I'm sorry. Can we have like a quick voice vote on the motion?
Yeah. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
We go on now to the review of the expert review in regards to petition 131 on cachexia. Dr. Anastasia Rowland Seymour gave her opinion on the potential use of medical marijuana in the treatment of cachexia. As you know, cachexia is approved for the treatment of nausea and vomiting with chemotherapy, as well as nausea and anorexia or cachexia with AIDS. What the petition hoped to expand was the use of medical marijuana for cachexia in situations in which cancer and AIDS was not the underlying diagnosis. As you kind of review her report, it centers on 2 concerns. I think one concern is on the side effects of marijuana in general. She talks about chronic use and its impact on psychological issues, paranoia, disengagement, impact on IQ, and other things that we've discussed, especially with the management of autism and other disorders. So these are, concerns that we expressed, especially with autism spectrum. She also expressed concerns in regards to the quality of the marijuana products. How confident are we that the products that are being dispensed are free of contaminants, are of medical grade? And I wondered, Alexandria, if you could comment on the current dispensary of marijuana products in Ohio, the quality assurance that we have with those products.
I have not had much direct participation related to that. I know that Department of Commerce regulates that. I'm not sure if Kim or Stephanie or Tessie may be able to speak in more detail about that.
Tessie, you want to chime in?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is quite a high standard for the medical marijuana products in Ohio. They do go to testing labs. We've witnessed a couple of recalls so far because, I mean, there were even minute indications that there might have been contaminants. It was an immediate recall. There were products called off the market just for mislabeling. So I know that they are very much engaged in the quality of the plants. They have a tracking system that it's called seed to sale because it literally goes from the seed of the plant until that plant is broken down, processed into different types of products, and then sold at the dispensary. So they can track where every single plant goes. They test all of the crops through several different testing laboratories, which those labs had to go through a competitive process to gain those contracts to do the testing. So it's quite a complex system, but I think there is a great deal of focus on the quality of the product and the safety of the product. When the program was stood up and these three entities were tasked with implementing a program, it was very patient safety focused. That was the top priority of it. So
that Ohio really pursues a very stringent, high quality control mechanism to really evaluate the products, to ensure quality control, and avoid contaminants. I know that was one of her big concerns that was expressed, but I think in the state of Ohio, that's something that the state has really addressed well, and that the quality of the product is pretty standard and free of contaminants. And so I didn't know if anybody else had any concerns about her opinion that was expressed based on that.
Yes, I'd like to comment. And I understand the concern, and I think it's a very notable one to bring up. And I will say that just given the mechanism and the scrutiny that the processors and the dispensaries and everyone is under, I feel as comfortable as I can be that the products Ohioans are going to get are of high quality grade. There are a lot of checks and balances in the system. I can't exactly necessarily guarantee that, but just from what I've heard on the Marijuana Advisory Committee that I also sit on, and listening and reading stuff that I've seen, at least gives me a level of comfort as a physician to trust the quality of the product.
The other concern that she expressed again was the potential for chronic side effects with medical marijuana use that again could have psychological ramifications. And we've discussed this a lot, especially when we talked about the therapy of autism spectrum and anxiety. So I didn't see anything new of concerns there that were expressed. I do agree with her opinion, and I've looked at PubMed and other things. There's not a lot of robust literature or clinical trials looking at cachexiism and its management with medical marijuana outside of cancer and AIDS. And so there really is limited research there. And I didn't know if anybody in the committee would have any comments to that concern.
I'd also like to comment on that as well, if I may. First of all, I think her opinion also, again, is a very valid one. I also think that that's something that has been discussed multiple times in the beginning of the process, and as we've added various diagnoses and just gone through the whole process of medical marijuana in our state. And they're warranted and valid responses and questions. However, the collective wisdom of people that came up with the medical marijuana control program in Ohio has looked past those for certain diagnoses, thinking that the benefits outweigh the risks in certain conditions and scenarios. And actually, cachexia being one of them, as it's tied in with HIV, AIDS, or cancer. But globally, I understand that is a huge concern, but it's one that we've looked at and gone through already.
Dr. Schottenstein?
Hi. So ironically, the synthetic THC cannabinoid on the market, the dronabinol, is conceivably quite a bit more potent than what patients are going to get at a marijuana dispensary. So if our concern is about things like, and understandably so, but things like paranoia, anxiety, and things like that, excuse me, those side effects are thought to be substantially THC mediated. So if anything, conceivably, we reduce the risk of those side effects compared to the dronabinol, right? So the risk of those side effects is certainly more than if you don't use medical marijuana, but conceivably less than if you use the dronabinol.
Yeah, and actually, Dr. Seymour brings that out in her testimony that the synthetic THCs like Marinol or dronabinol are 7 times more potent than marijuana itself. So, it would at least imply to me they would have less potential risk of side effects than what is currently FDA approved. So, one of our concerns was the potential side effects, but then the synthetic variant, which is FDA approved, is 7 times more potent than medical marijuana, according to her opinion. Robert?
Mark, maybe we should let her, if she has any thoughts, and we've thrown a lot of stuff her way as to why, we think it is, preferable is not the word, right? It could be used, I think is better statement for medical marijuana as opposed to what's out there today. But I'd be curious here if the good doctor has any comments based upon what she's heard so far.
So thank you for inviting me. I agree with everything that you have said. So I am somewhat of two minds with the use of medical marijuana for cachexia. The data to date is not there for the use of medical marijuana for cachexia other than for cancer-related or for AIDS-related cachexia, nausea, and vomiting. That being said, there is, there are trials underway, so the data might be coming down the data may be coming down the pike. Can you hear me? Or do you hear an echo?
Yeah, we do. Can you turn the volume?
Tessie, you are also.
Is that any better?
No, not yet. Let's try.
Is that any better?
I can hear you fine.
I can hear you. Yeah, thank you.
So I am concerned about the possibility of side effects. You are correct that dronabinol will have a higher likelihood of side effects, in part because it's more potent, but also because it's a concentration of THC without the CBD, which may actually have some anxiolytic effect. So if the argument from Dr. Weeks was that medical marijuana was potentially more efficacious than dronabinol, or perhaps less likely to produce side effects.
And Dr. Schottenstein, I'm going to ask you to use the microphone.
Say it again.
I think Dr. Schottenstein's microphone might have been giving us a bit of an echo, so I'm going to see if I can keep him muted, and that should help us on the sound there.
Okay.
All right, very good. I'm sorry. Please proceed.
So I think if the argument were that the whole herb was likely to be more efficacious, then I probably would agree. But that didn't seem like that was the presented argument from Dr. Weeks.
Dr. Schottenstein?
Or Dr. Schottenstein?
You-
Your mic is muted. Yes, muted. Yes. Sorry, I'm so used to always being on from the regular meetings. So forgive me. I was going to say, appreciate the concern about the data about medical marijuana and cachexia, and also the fact that we do, in fact, essentially have that indication right now for things like AIDS and cancer. And I'm thinking inflammatory bowel disease also is that's part of the issue as well there for that indication. I guess I would also point out though that there's the cachexia and then there's the loss of appetite itself, right? So the loss of appetite itself is really distressing. In other words, I think that it's probably not fair to say that medical marijuana treats the syndrome of cachexia, but I also think there's a very real quality of life issue when you have somebody with just a poor appetite. People miss out on social opportunities. They miss out on the enjoyment of eating. I also feel like just from a mental health standpoint, it could be really beneficial to give people, something that will increase their appetite, even if it doesn't go to the heart of the cachexia per se.
I had a question for Dr. Seymour. In looking at the medical literature in regards to therapeutic treatment of cachexia with medical marijuana, it does seem like there's not any robust clinical trial development or things like that. I didn't know if you had any comment to make on the existing medical literature and the treatment of cachexia with medical marijuana.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I understand the question.
Well, in your review of the medical literature as an expert witness, it appeared to me that there was not a lot of robust clinical trial development looking at the role of medical marijuana in the treatment of cachexia. And we find that with all the other different indications too. If you look at conditions that are already approved for the treatment of medical marijuana, there's, again, not a lot of medical literature out there or evidence-based medicine support that, but I didn't know if you had any particular opinion on existing literature in the treatment of cachexia with medical marijuana, or any overall impression of it, of what exists out there today.
So one of my major concerns was the whole consideration of safety and being able to trace herb to product. And if your sources and the good manufacturing process is being followed, and you are able to confirm that there's chemical fingerprinting of whatever the species is that is being provided, then there's probably minimal harm.
I think, the struggle that we always have as a committee is, again, not a lot of robust clinical trials or evidence-based medicine that we face. So I think the committee is kind of at a point right now where we need to look at, do we look at moving forward with submitting this to the board, for their vote? How do we feel as a committee on approval of cachexia? I think we've had a really excellent review by Dr. Seymour, which I really appreciate. That's really laid out concerns for the quality of the product. I think in Ohio, we're fortunate that we have good quality control, concerns for side effects, and then concerns for lack of efficacy, lack of documentation in the medical literature of its efficacy. Does anybody have some thoughts as far as moving forward with approval or denial of approval going forward? Any comments, Dr. Soin?
Yes, thank you. I would be comfortable moving forward for approval to the full board.
Dr. Schottenstein? Let's see here.
I'm sorry. I sort of feel like of all the things that could come our way, as a possible indication for medical marijuana, this one, is as strong of a case, I think, as one could possibly make, because we have already this synthetic THC cannabinoid that's been approved by the FDA for treatment of cachexia. So, I feel like we are on as good a ground as we're going to get in terms of, going forward in that regard. And, I do think that, having sort of talked this through, concerns about the quality of the product and the side effects have been substantially addressed. And again, it's a devastating condition for patients and their families. We've already essentially approved it for cachexia in other syndromes, right, such as AIDS and cancer. And so I think, I'm going to vote to, have it proceed.
Robert?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same mind. I don't like that there isn't clinical trials like would be established in pharmaceuticals, and Marinol is a good example. But on the other hand, I think Michael raises a good point. There's a synthetic cannabinoid out there, and we're using it. And given the benefits versus the risks in this one, especially since we do have quality control parameters, I'm kind of inclined to push for this one too, realizing that, it's not perfect, but I mean, even if you look at the economics, I just pulled it up, 60 dronabinol, 2.5 milligrams costs $250 per RX. That's not cheap. So I think the economics actually kind of weigh in favor of this perhaps too. Thanks.
My feeling has been that, we do have good quality control measures with our dispensaries. We do have already FDA approval of a synthetic THC for the treatment of cachexia, nausea and vomiting, and cancer and AIDS. As Dr. Seymour pointed out, the synthetic approved FDA product is maybe 7 times more potent than medical marijuana. As Dr. Schottenstein has pointed out, lack of appetite can be very distressing for a lot of patients. And, you go out for dinner and you just can't eat. And a lot of times what happens is that when you lose your appetite, your friends are saying, just eat, your family members, and they put even more pressure on you. And then it creates a really stressful situation. So I would be in favor of moving forward with it too, based on the fact we do have FDA approval of a synthetic variant. And there's, in my opinion, definitely some potential benefit. I do realize the lack of a good, robust clinical trials, but we lack that in every indication that's already approved by the legislature. We just don't have a lot of evidence-based medicine, but I think this is one of the situations where it may be worthwhile to move forward. So I guess at the next point, we would need a motion to move forward with our recommendation for approval to the board, full board meeting. Does anybody want to make that motion?
Unmuted.
Sure, I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. I guess we could do a voice vote.
Unmuted.
Everybody say aye.
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 So it's the petition is approved by our committee.
Dr. Seymour for her assistance in this.
We very much appreciate that. And you put a lot of detail work in there, which is really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more business before the committee?
Thank you so much.
I think you have a motion to adjourn.
Dr. Bechtel,
Yes.
did you also want Did you also want to offer recommendations to the full board for the other two petitions for under consideration?
Yeah, we talked about, I think at our last meeting to, that as a committee, we would not recommend the use of medical marijuana, the treatment of anxiety, or for the treatment of the autism spectrum disorder. But we would approve it for the treatment of cachexia.
Very good. Did you want to motion to recommend to the board to not accept those two petitions during this committee, and then they can look at all three during the next meeting?
Yes, I'd like to. Could I have another motion on that?
Muted.
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries.
Very good. Thank you. And then if there's no more business, you are welcome to ask for a motion to adjourn then.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Second? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
All in favor, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Have a good one.